You're a Championship manager going well in the league, looking red hot for promotion, and a struggling Premier League team approaches you to take over as manager and keep them up. They offer to double your salary on a 3-year deal, but if you don't keep them up, you likely face the sack. What do you do? Do you stick or twist? Welcome back to the Sportsman Untitled. We've got a bit of an FA Cup special today, and I'm taking interim charge instead of Simon. My name's Stephen, and I'm joined by our EFL experts, Gab Sutton and Justin Peach. How are we doing, boys?
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Steve.
Great, thanks, Steve. Thanks for having me on.
Nice to hear it. Right, we're going to review the weekend of the Championship before we get stuck into an FA Cup. Gab, 7th heaven for Leeds against Cardiff. Take us away, son.
Yeah, look, I found another fantastic home result for Leeds United. And Justin, I want to kind of talk to you a little bit about this. I feel sorry for visiting teams to Elland Road because we've criticised Plymouth Argyle for going there with basically a 6-3-1 shape and not really laying a glove on Leeds. This was a few months ago. Cardiff actually tried to be really aggressive on Leeds, but they kind of got caught in between, certainly for the first goal, I thought they got caught between two because on the one hand, the instruction was to go after Leeds and be really aggressive and try and impose their game and stop Leeds playing theirs. But then you could see that bit of indecision when the ball got turned over between the midfield and defensive units, where the midfield was thinking, we've got to go and press, and the defence was thinking, hang on, we don't want to get caught out by Dan James's pace. And in the end, they kind of did neither. And that's where Leeds had some joy. So it just shows how difficult it is to get it right at Elland Road. And any team that is able to get it right and get something there will probably deserve a lot of credit when they do.
Well, deserving credit is another thing, but I think when you go to Elland Road, you need to have a better look on your side, don't you? You look at how many chances Leeds create at home. This Cardiff game is in isolation in terms of technical brilliance, quality of chances being created and being clinical. But even if you go back to the first day of the season against Portsmouth were absolutely peppered, weren't they? And they come away with a 3-3 draw. They had a bit of luck on this side, and it's not to discredit the performance that Portsmouth put in, but these were good enough to get 3 points that day. But as I say, Portsmouth had the luck on their side. But as you point out, I think Cardiff were stuck between systems there in terms of whether they go for Leeds and open themselves up, which they did, but also Leeds they fancied it. It felt like that sort of fixture for Daniel Farke's boys. It was a game where they really, really turned it on. And one of the things we can criticise Leeds for this season, there's not too many things, but one of the things you can criticise them for is their ability to kill off games. And they really killed it off. It was just one of those times. It was a proper Daniel Farke performance where even each goal almost replicated each other. They were getting to the byline, getting it into a good goal scoring position. And when a team's on it like that, you have to feel sorry for the opposition. Unfortunately, Cardiff were victims to a team that was just hungry for it.
Yeah, the other thing that stood out to me, Justin, was Junior Firpo, because, I think in the second half of last season, we saw a bit more of what he's capable of. But I think that having a better midfield and having a team that is a bit more proactive in the way that it tries to create chances than it was last season, I think that's brought the best out of Firpo, because whereas I think last season he would have to try and create the space himself, he can certainly do that still this season brilliantly. But I think there were one or two times where the ball was played so far ahead of him, and it was, weighted beautifully for him, that it just allowed him to put in these brilliant crosses to the back stick that were just kind of on a sixpence, but had real whip on them. And it was a brilliant delivery, and I think that's on a different level to what we've seen from Junior Firpo last season, perhaps. And I wonder if that has something to do with maybe Leeds just being such a better and more creative all-round team.
They probably are a more rounded team. When you've got someone like Ayo Tanaka in midfield, for example, who can cover every blade of grass, and Joe Rothwell, who I think did a lot of credit in the way he's changed roles in his team as an individual this season. He's a bit more of a between a 6 and an 8, if you like, where he's a bit more box to box and a bit more rounded. I think the way Farke shaped the team up in that sense, obviously to cover injuries, but it's really benefited others, and obviously Firpo coming back. there's a bit more balance to their width, to how they get forwards. Jayden Bogle, we know what he can do going forwards, but Firpo is of a similar mould. I mean, at international level, he plays as a striker for his country, which goes to show what he can do going forwards. Probably on the extreme side of things, but his quality and his deliveries was there to be shown against Cardiff. But I think this side is starting to replicate what Farke is really good at, in that he gets his midfield balance right, and he just allows the wide areas just to get forward in attack. You look at that Norwich team, Max Aarons, Jamal Lewis, very nice double pivot sometimes of, Alex Tete, going to the early years, and obviously Oliver Skipp, towards the latter. So I think once Farke, it feels like he's found that midfield balance, he's allowing that to express itself, which is, as we saw it against Cardiff, they really express themselves.
Yeah, I think in terms of the automatic promotion race at the moment, Leeds very much looking like the standout team on current form, and I'll be very surprised if they're not a team that wraps up one of the top two berths. I think what's going to be really interesting is whether Sheffield United, with their recruitment, and this is obviously deadline day as we record, so there may be some business for them to come in the next 10, 12 hours or so. But I think what's going to be, Sheffield United haven't necessarily played that well. I would say for a long time, they've not been sort of stringing performances together over the last month or two. Burnley, they've scored, I think it's something like 5 goals in their last, or 6 goals in their last 7 games. So that's a bit of a worry, from Burnley's point of view. They're that absolute clean sheet machine, but they're not necessarily scoring that many goals. Do you think if Sunderland were to win at Middlesbrough tonight, that would give them a real opportunity in terms of the automatic promotion race, with maybe some of the limitations we're seeing from Sheffield United and Burnley?
It's a great question. I mean, you'd expect Sheffield United to go from strength to strength, but since obviously bringing in Tom Cannon and Ben Brereton Diaz before that Hull game, we've not really seen it. I know they combined for the winner against Derby, but we're not seeing, the Sheffield United we saw. I mean, even when they were reduced to bare bones over the Christmas period, the festive period, and picking up some poor results, the performances were still good. But now they've got players back and, arguably a stronger forward line. We're not seeing the balance, but again, I think that's a case of time will tell with that. I think it will improve over time. It's just while they're trying to get the best out of what he's got at the moment, which is a new forward line. With Burnley, again, it's difficult. It's difficult with them because I think if they turn it on going forwards, they've clearly got the quality at the back to see teams out and keep them at arm's length. And obviously that leaves Sunderland. It's such an interesting question with Sunderland, is whether or not they've got the character and the experience to maintain this push. I mean, Enzo Lefebvre is a good signing. It's a great signing. And he adds a lot of quality in terms of his passing and his vision, which I think can unlock a different type of creativity for Sunderland, where if you got players on the shoulder like Wilson Isidore, and we saw it against Burnley, that Lefebvre, he played that pass that unlocked a ball in behind. It was beautiful. And he sort of obviously missed a one-on-one. But it gives them that dimension that I don't think Sunderland had before. And obviously keeping Tom Watson will be big once he gets back from injury. But I think with them, I just worry about whether we get to the real sticky point of the season, the business end, if you like, whether or not they've got the experience to do it. But I think I'd be naive in ruling them out. I really would be.
Yeah, I understand the experience argument, but I just think that the prodigious talents in this Sunderland squad is going to be a massive factor, and I think that they've got a really nice balance about them in terms of they can create chances. They have got a really nice defensive shape about them. They can go and press at the right moments. I think if maybe the one weakness that we've talked about, every team having one weakness, I think Sunderland's would probably be actually, sometimes I've seen them at home when they've got into a 1-goal lead in the second half, maybe being a bit conservative. I saw them against Coventry back in November. I think they were 2-0 up in that game, and Regis Lebris put on another centre half, and that I felt like that invited a little bit of pressure. Same possibly against Plymouth Argyle. So that's the one thing I would like to see from Sunderland. Actually, just manage Leeds by maybe being a bit braver and doing what got them into the lead, as opposed to maybe being a bit more conservative. But that's probably the one blemish on Lebris' copybook, because otherwise he's done a fantastic job.
Yeah, he has. He's been fantastic, and I think that conservatism does help in some regards when you've got a group of players who are young, who have displayed some naivety. I think you would sort of fall back into that defensive first mentality at times. I mean, at least they're getting ahead in games. The argument you can throw at Scott Parker's Burnley is that they're not really testing opposition enough, and I think Sunderland have found different ways to win games. And like I said, I think the naivety of the players is probably an easy argument to make, but I think when they've got such a young group of players who are going to be linked with moves away, as we've seen over January, it can disrupt things. I know it hasn't done that in terms of results, but as I say, I think once the game starts to come thick and fast again, that'll be the big test. I think February is a big month for Sunderland in terms of keeping up with the chasing pack, and then we get to sort of March after that international break. That's when we'll really know where they're at.
Well, further down the table, I wanted to look at Swansea, Justin, because they sold Matt Grimes, their captain. I think Harry Darling has been linked away as well. There does seem to be this trend of people leaving Swansea, and I think there's some people unhappy with Matt Grimes in the timing of leaving, having given the club lots of service. On the other hand, there's also a discontent with the ownership of Swansea City as well, and whether there's been enough money that's been reinvested into the club. And I'm just wondering, given the defensive vulnerabilities we've seen from Swansea in recent weeks, are they a team that you think could possibly plummet into the relegation conversation?
It's something I would question. I mean, I've always held the opinion that their starting 11 prior to Matt Grimes leaving, probably prior to the January transfer window, I always maintain that the starting 11's just about good enough to compete for a top 6 place, but it's the squad depth that's been an issue for a long time. And now obviously Matt Grimes has left. That the person at the front of the band, the orchestrator, trying to
go with it.
Yeah, we'll go with it. The one the conductor, the one wiggling the stick. He's gone, and I think that from a possession point of view, in possession, I think is a big thing. But actually, Matt Grimes' ball recoveries as well, his ability to read opposition play and protect the back four is also very, very effective. And again, losing that is a big blow. So not only in possession are Swansea going to suffer without Matt Grimes, but out of possession, I think they're going to suffer as well. But losing him just a few days before the end of the transfer window doesn't leave them with a lot of time to recruit. And I know they've been linked with a couple of players, and there could be a couple of players coming in at the time of recording, but it's someone of his experience, his leadership is a huge blow. And I think missing that is a big problem. But also defensively, they've opened themselves up. Since Luke Williams was linked with the West Brom role, we've seen them really drop off, and the way they concede goals has been incredibly poor. I mean, against Coventry at the weekend, that the big concerns for me was going forwards. They created next to nothing, but they were so open at the back. And I think 2-0 really did flatter them. So I do sit here quite concerned that they could drop into a relegation battle, which would be a disaster, considering where they were and where I think this project was going under Luke Williams. But it's hit a bumpy path, hasn't it?
Yeah, certainly has. The other thing is, I really like Luke Williams as an in-possession coach. I actually think he's one of the best in the Championship, cultivating a style. I've rated his work for a long time, going back to his work at Swindon and MK Dons alongside Russ Martin. But I think as an out-of-possession coach, I think he has limitations. I think he can be a bit stubborn, and I think that his stylistic ideals can sometimes be used almost to deflect away from some defensive fragilities. And I think, he's got to find some solutions in that area to stop the rot, really. So I'm a little bit worried about Swansea, given that I've got a feeling it might be a high points total required for safety in the Championship, because even you look at Plymouth Argyle, for instance, they've taken 4 points from Sunderland away and West Brom at home, which is a fantastic return. And it seems like, they've really rallied in after losing Morgan Whittaker, and you wonder what sort of, whether that, the recruitment as well. A couple of the centre-backs they brought in have brought some real aerial presence. The left wing-back as well played really well for them at the weekend. So it seems like there's a real togetherness under Miran Muslic, and they're in it as much as anyone. So it's hard to pick 3 teams to go down, right?
Oh yeah, it's impossible. It's impossible. I mean, if you look at Oxford prior to Gary Rowett, you'd have guaranteed them to finish in the bottom three. But the turnaround there, their ability to, I know they're drawing a lot of games at the moment, but they're seeing opposition out. They've risen up the table. Mark Robbins has got his first win at Stoke. That's a huge thing, and again, it pulls them up. Cardiff were looking brilliant, and then they lose 7-0 to Leeds. Portsmouth are brilliant at home, terrible away from home. Hull terrible at home, but looking really good away from home under Ruben Sellers. Derby are a disaster. Luton are a disaster. It's so open, I think, at the moment. And like you said, it's incredibly hard to pick three teams out. And again, you'd have guaranteed Plymouth to drop down with ease, but I think that the fighting spirit they're displaying now, I think, is commendable. It really is.
I mean, you say Derby are a disaster. I mean, I do have reservations now, just on a final point on the relegation battle. I do have reservations about whether Paul Warne has what it takes at championship level. At the same time, I don't look at Derby County and see a team that's been constantly outplayed and carved open. I feel like you have found yourselves on the wrong end of fine margins in recent games as well.
Yeah, it's fine margins, but it's also fine margins. Oh, actually, no, I wouldn't say it's fine margins at the other end of the pitch. Going forward, I think Derby are really, really poor. Outside of set pieces, I think they're becoming incredibly predictable and easy to play against. I think if you can defend crosses, and if you set your team up to defend crosses, I think you're on to at least a point against Derby. I think it's very simple, and I do worry that they could end up finishing bottom if Paul Warne remains in charge for the rest of the season. And it's very easy to criticise Paul Warne after 7 straight league defeats, but the manner in those defeats where, yes, Derby aren't getting hammered, but also, and the balance of chances are not creating enough either. So, scorelines aren't reflecting, I think, the actual performances that they're putting in.
Right, well, we've had enough of that EFL Championship chat. Obviously, we bring you in for your expertise on this, but it is FA Cup season. We're on to the 4th round. And starting that 4th round is the 4th time we've seen Man United versus Leicester this season. A return to Old Trafford for Ruud van Nistelrooy. Gab, thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I think he's obviously a club legend there, did a decent job as caretaker. I do wonder whether Leicester City are going to regret going for a punt on somebody like Ruud van Nistelrooy when more established Premier League managers like Graham Potter was available, or David Moyes if you want to go down the other side of the sort of stylistic spectrum. But whether better options might have been available to Leicester, whether they spoke to Graham Potter and weren't able to offer him the budget required, but it does seem like a bit of a step to go for somebody like Ruud van Nistelrooy, who maybe doesn't have the same level of experience in the big leagues. So yeah, that would be the question mark there. But it seems like as far as Manchester United are concerned, you could really do with a trophy to sort of get the Ruben Amorim era started, because it's been quite a miserable time for yourselves, hasn't it?
It's been a bit of a disaster start. It's a bit of a weird game, I suppose. Ruud van Nistelrooy he is massively struggling. I'd be surprised if you saw the end of the season. Perhaps Leicester fell into the flavour of the month trap a bit too soon after his interim spell as United boss. But yeah, it's probably an uneventful tie. It's a Friday night tie that we've seen a few times this season already, and every single time it's been very one-way traffic.
Who are the ones that you want to see at get a chance at Man United? Because it seems like, I think whenever a club needs a real rebuild, you've got to employ consequences where if you don't pull your weight, the youngster from the academy is going to get you a chance. I know you've got a lad called Amos, the left back. You've got Toby Collier, I think, in the academy, who's been getting into I think he's back fit now, isn't he? Are these the kind of players that you want to see get an opportunity?
Absolutely. There's some great names, and I've been really excited to see United dip into the loan market, really, looking at the pyramid below the Premier League and finding these teams. Like, we've sent Ethan Ennis to Doncaster, we've sent Ethan Wheatley to Walsall. These are really good grounds to learn how to play the game. You're playing against proper opposition, proper teams that there's going to be a bit of bite in the tackle. They might see that, they might know that where you've come from, or they might have allegiances elsewhere, and you might get snapped a few times. And that's exactly what you want for the players coming up through the ranks. You've seen it across the country. You've seen it with Sunderland's midfield right now. That's a very young midfield, and they're learning their trade in the hardest league possibly in the world. and it's a great place to be learning. It's fantastic. I think Ethan Ennis and Ethan Wheatley are the two that I'd be keeping my eye on this sort of last few months of the season to see where they end up.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Ethan Wheatley's got to replace Nathan Lowe at Walsall, which is going to be a big stretch for him because he did brilliantly on loan from Stoke. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see whether Ethan Wheatley can kind of step up to that mantle. But yeah, hopefully there's opportunities for people in that cup game for Man United, and because you've got to start sort of building a squad that you can try and move forward with.
Absolutely, it's not going to be easy for a club like United, leaning on the academy, sort of what they're known for and what they should be specialised in. So, yeah, it's interesting times. It's turbulent times, but it's never going to be easy. The early kickoff on Saturday, we've got Leyton Orient versus Manchester City. So it's a great tie because Orient at home. I absolutely love to see that. Justin, talk to me about these sort of FA Cup ties.
I mean, it's very easy to throw the cliches at it, but they're the sort of games that do make you fall in love with the FA Cup. I mean, early kickoffs for me, FA Cup are actually really, really intriguing and really enticing. And when we're on free-to-air TV, it's even better. I mean, the Tamworth Spurs game was an epitome of that. Taking them to extra time, it was absolutely fantastic. And these aren't easy games for big clubs either. Not only do the opposition raise their games, but the atmosphere, the types of facilities that they've got to put up with as well. It's a shock to the system. It's why Kenilworth Road was such a hard place to go to for Premier League sides in last season. You got Leyton Orient who were looking brilliant under Richie Wellens as well, and Man City smarting after an absolute hammering in London against Arsenal. So I think this game really does open itself up in that sense, because you got a team there that's licking their wounds a little bit in Man City, wanting to have a reaction, but it's an FA Cup. It's an FA Cup game, and again, to annoyingly throw the cliche in there, it's one of those that anything can happen. So yeah, it's FA Cup heritage, these sorts of fixtures. It really is.
There's not many teams that be playing Leyton Orient on a weekend and Real Madrid the week after, is there, Gab?
No, and I'm really excited about this game from a managerial point of view, because I remember when Paul Cook faced Pep Guardiola as Wigan Athletic manager in the FA Cup, and there was a bit of a scrap in the tunnel, and there's part of me wondering whether there could be something similar, because Richie Wellens is quite a feisty manager. He's somebody who's not going to shy away from saying what he thinks, and I think there's a possibility that kind of gets under Guardiola's skin a little bit. So I'm quite intrigued to see how it plays out from that point of view. But I think for Leyton Orient, they're gonna need Josh Keeley, the goalkeeper on loan from Tottenham, to have an absolutely fantastic game. And obviously they're going to need to rely on those defensive foundations that they've set over the last couple of months, where they've been a bit of a clean sheet machine in League One. They've got Jordan Brown in midfield as well, who covers every blade of grass. He's going to need to put in a gargantuan shift, really. And then, they're going to need to have a little bit of luck. But it is at Brisbane Road, and I think that's the one thing where, if you're going to say, give Leyton Orient a chance somewhere, it's probably going to be that factor, because I think if it was going to be played at Man City, then that would have been a lot more difficult. But Brisbane Road gives them a chance.
I already can't wait for that one. That one's going to be so good. Next on the list, we've got Coventry versus Ipswich. Obviously, Coventry fresh off a 2-1 win away at Swansea, and Ipswich, they are struggling, aren't they? It's not been great so far this season. Either of you, feel free to sort of break this one down. It's an interesting game because Ipswich, if they survive, it's going to be really difficult for them to survive. That's basically what the memo is, and it could be a game we're seeing again next season with both teams in varying positions. So.
Yeah, if I go back to when Frank Lampard was first linked with getting his first managerial job, it was Ipswich Town that was coined. So this could well be the Frank Lampard derby that never was really. But moving on to the teams,
Frank Lampard's derby.
Let's not Gab. We'll move on for that quick. Yeah, still got scars, but I think from an Ipswich perspective, it's a bad time to play Coventry, because not only are they finding their feet under Lampard, Lampard's really getting a groove out of his squad now. I mean, it's a good squad. It's a squad built for promotion from the Championship, and there's a lot of quality young players. Obviously, Matt Grimes could well be introduced. I'm actually not sure if he played in the FA Cup third round for Swansea, so he might even be cup tied. But still doesn't take away from the quality of the squad that Lampard's got available to him. Haji Wright could be back as well, which would be brilliant news for Lampard and Coventry. But again, with Ipswich losing away at Southampton at the weekend, conceding a hell of a lot of goals, Muric not convincing at all in the Town goal either. This is a really good time to play Ipswich, and it could well be another FA Cup run for Coventry if they get a result here. Because as I say, I think if you're going to go up against a team in the Premier League, if it's not Southampton, you probably want to play Ipswich.
Do you agree with that one, Gab?
Yeah, I'm feeling Coventry might be able to win this one, because I think the FA Cup is a really prestigious competition to Lampard. It's something that he's won multiple times as a player, and I think he's going to want to do well in that competition as a manager and have some of those high profile games. And because I do think that that it comes when you've got a such a high profile ex player managing a championship club, there is part of them thinking about their own managerial brand as well as their own team's fortunes. And I think from Lampard's point of view, he's going to be wanting to win that tie so that he might get an opportunity to pit his wits against some of the best managers in the country again in the fifth round. So I think also the other thing is you've got to look at Coventry's form and the squad depth that they've got that Justin mentioned. I think their midfield options look brilliant. You've got Ellis Sims and Brandon Thomas Asante with a brilliant instinctive finish at Swansea at the weekend. So he's going to cause problems and hopefully he can come into form. So Coventry all of a sudden are starting to look pretty strong in terms of squad depth. They'll be looking to compete on both fronts.
Moving on from Cov versus Ipswich, Gab, your beloved Birmingham are hosting Newcastle at 5:45 on Saturday. That's going to be a decent clash as well. Newcastle are obviously going to come down in great numbers. It's one where the atmosphere will probably be a lot to write home about, and anybody there will be lucky enough to have witnessed it. Really, obviously the team's in quite.
We're going for a treble at the moment, Stay. We're going for the League One title, EFL Trophy and FA Cup.
I wouldn't deny you that.
To rival the 99. No, I think... I'm really excited about our second half performance at the weekend against Rotherham. I think Mark Leonard, when he came off the bench, made a massive difference because I think when it was just because in the first half we had Tomoki Iwata, who was my man of the match, alongside Taylor Gardner-Hickman. But as much as I like Gardner-Hickman's work rate and his versatility, he's not one of our better players on the ball. And I think for the system that we play, we need two central midfielders who are very comfortable in possession and can do that playmaking side. So I'm hoping that Mark Leonard comes in for possibly Gardner Hickman, or at least the two of them start in midfield, because I think Mark Leonard makes a massive difference when Paik Sung-ho is absent. And hopefully he can grab his opportunity to become and give himself a platform to maybe become a bigger part of our squad in the Championship, because I've seen in my own eyes if we get to the Championship, of course, got to add that caveat in. It's looking good for us at the moment. I've seen with my own eyes how good Mark Leonard is from his time at Northampton Town. I've seen him hit a diagonal on the half volley, so he's clearly a brilliant technical footballer, and I'm really excited for him to get that opportunity to show what he can do against a Premier League side like Newcastle. We've got Alfie May and Jay Stansfield obviously got himself a couple of goals, but I thought Alfie May made a real impact from the bench with his energy as well. So I think we have got the squad to be competitive in the FA Cup, League One, and in the EFL Trophy. Bring on the team.
Yeah, I just want to throw something in. I think low key this is quite a big game for the FA Cup this weekend. I think when you look at Birmingham as a brand, they'll want these types of fixtures, so they'll be really up for it. And then Newcastle, the pressure of winning a trophy is still there, isn't it? With the ownership, with the investment, the pressure of winning a trophy is still there. So I think in terms of how big a game this is for both teams, I think it's big. And obviously St Andrews as well is going to be, it's going to be absolutely massive. It's going to be rocking, which is going to add to it. But also,
just on that point, Justin, it's much harder to get a ticket this season than it ever was when we were in the Championship, and it's because of the new ownership, because of what they've done to basically change the feeling around the club and the ground and the improved match day experience. So there is a lot more optimism than we ever had under the previous regime, even though we're in the division lower. So there's definitely a feel good factor around the club. Weirdly, even though we've just got relegated to the lowest league for 30 odd years.
Yeah, and an FA Cup run can really, really springboard you. I mean, it could be a distraction as well, but given the investment in the size of Birmingham's squad for a League One side, I don't think it's going to be an issue. But yeah, I think it's actually a big game. As I say, big game for both teams. Birmingham want these types of fixtures very regularly, and Newcastle got that pressure of winning a trophy, so they have to win. They really do. Otherwise, what's all this investment for?
Absolutely.
It's an interesting one. Newcastle with quite a thin squad as well, so it'll be interesting to see what numbers do actually come on against Birmingham on Saturday. It is an interesting one. Moving on to Sunday's games, but we'll come back to Southampton versus Burnley a little later on. Blackburn versus Wolves at Ewood Park. Nice little clash that for John Eustace, I think. A nice little visit from a team that is going to prioritise the Premier League at this time rather than the Cup, I imagine.
Yeah, and this could really open it up for Blackburn. I think, with Wolves, and obviously I think the distraction of the transfer window will be done by then, obviously, which is going to help matters. Blackburn themselves hit a bit of a bumpy run of form in the league, but I think again, that win against Preston could be a springboard. They've done really well in reacting to I wouldn't say poor runs of form, but multiple draws, losses, etc. But again, in terms of fixtures, this one is very. I think John Eustace will see it as a winnable one, and I think he's a very pragmatic manager, which again could go a long way in an FA Cup run.
Gab, thoughts on this one? Blackburn, Wolves?
I hope John Eustace has the opportunity to show what he can do and pit his wits against Premier League managers. I mean, hopefully for him, he gets the chance to do that next season, but I would say that's unlikely. But I think that the pragmatism that Justin mentioned is a great point. I also think he's just such a down-to-earth human being who cultivates a real togetherness in the clubs that he manages. And also it's an opportunity for Matt Targay to continue his form after grabbing a goal for himself on Friday night. So hopefully he can be the talisman for Rovers against Premier League opposition.
Moving on from the 12:30 on the Sunday, we've got the Plymouth versus Liverpool at 3 o'clock on ITV. That's going to be another interesting game as well. It's nice to see a lot of the Championship teams get home ties against Premier League teams. In my opinion, that makes it so much better anyway. Obviously, you miss out on the financial aspect that a larger venue would source. But Liverpool have got a bit of test, haven't they, Gab?
Yeah, I mean, I think Liverpool obviously have the willingness to the ability to rotate their squad and still have an incredible footballers there. I think what Plymouth Argyle will do is try and produce a competitive performance that can give them a sort of springboard for their bid for safety in the Championship, because when they won 1-0 at Brentford and you saw the celebrations of Kevin Nanskiville, he looked absolutely over the moon to have sort of managed that victory, and he was very emotional at full time. I think that it's those kind of moments that can inspire a team. And obviously they got their first league win in 4 months, which was huge for them against West Brom. They showed enormous spirit, brace for Ryan Hardy, and he could be the one to kind of be that talisman for Plymouth Argyle going into the last third of the campaign. But if they can be competitive against Liverpool, and they've done it before, by the way, because when they were in League Two in the 16-17 campaign, Derek Adams took them to Anfield and they got a goalless draw there. So it shows they can do it against Liverpool. I think Lucas might have scored in the return leg at Home Park in the replay. No replays this time, of course. So Argyle will be hoping to be competitive against the Reds and hopefully hold them in 90 minutes again.
Yeah, I think Home Park's such an awkward ground to go to as well. And not only, is it the distance they've got to travel, no Premier League clubs will probably fly there, but we've seen teams go there and struggle, even this season. I know it's not been quite the same for them as it has done in previous years, but I do think it's an awkward one for Arne Slot in Liverpool. And if he over-rotates his squad, I think that does hand it to Plymouth. But that being said, it does depend what Plymouth we get. If we get Plymouth, how they played against Burnley, for example, this will be a terrifying fixture for Argyle. But if we get the one that's been showing a lot of fight, a lot of scrap against Sunderland and West Brom and compactness, then I think it's a really, really awkward one. And as I say, it depends what side Arne Slot puts out, because league's a priority, Europe's a priority. Is the FA Cup a priority? Probably not until they get to the quarterfinal. So if there's too much rotation, I think this hands it to Plymouth potentially.
And then to end the Sunday, we've got Aston Villa versus Spurs. I mean, it's an all Premier League clash. I don't think it's the most exciting one we possibly could have asked for, but Villa Park is a traditional FA Cup sort of heritage ground. We absolutely love to see games played there in the FA Cup, and a debut possibly for Marcus Rashford, which will probably be the story of that game. Justin, any thoughts on that one?
I think Unai Emery. Post Europe, they lose. They've been losing a lot of games post Europe. So obviously, a week's rest would potentially do them some good. And again, I think for Spurs and Ange, it's about firefighting at the moment. He's trying to keep his job, and I think a trophy win will do that. Obviously, they've got League Cup action in midweek, and that'll be a big priority. So again, whether or not he goes into this game, if they get through to the final of the League Cup, might take the pressure off this one a little bit. Again, if they lose, it ramps the pressure up. So it's a bit of a powder keg situation for Spurs and Postecoglou, which again could hand it to Aston Villa and Unai Emery. But again, with Unai Emery, Aston Villa are one of those clubs that have spent a lot of money, have not really got a lot to show for it other than getting into the Champions League. So again, it just. I always see the FA Cup as a bit of a motivation for clubs, but I don't think they really treat it, like that sometimes. So it's frustrating, but I think from a Spurs perspective, this is a powder keg.
Yeah, I mean, it's two clubs that haven't won a trophy for a long time. I think Spurs have had one since 1991 because they won the League Cup in 2008, didn't they, when Jonathan Woodgate scored. So that's a massive thing for Tottenham Hotspur. And then similarly, Villa, I think, haven't won a trophy since winning the League Cup. I think they beat Manchester United in 1996. Daly and Atkinson scored. So I don't know whether you would have been around for that one, Steve, but...
Not quite, but I know it.
But yeah, I think for both those clubs, I think winning trophy would be a huge step forward. But I'm probably a bigger admirer of Unai Emery's methodology because I think it's more likely to give them an edge against the elite, whereas I think you try and play the same way as the top clubs with lesser quality players. It's harder to see where the edge is going to come from in terms of Ange Postecoglou, whereas I get the feeling that the big clubs would absolutely hate going to Villa Park, hate facing an Unai Emery side because he's able to do so well in those big games and counter opponents so well. So, I'm a massive admirer of Unai Emery. I think he's doing a fantastic job at Villa. Unfortunately, as a Birmingham City fan.
We said we'd come back to it. Southampton versus Burnley, the bottom of the Premier League side, facing a team fighting for that promotion spot. It is an interesting one, this one. I feel like Burnley have really got the opportunity to possibly get to that fifth round and crack on in the FA Cup this year.
Yeah, it's one of them where I think these clubs, both in their current states, probably too good for the Championship, but not quite good enough for the Premier League. And we're seeing that with Burnley, the amount of draws they're picking up. We've seen it with Southampton, the amount of games they're losing in the Premier League. So I think this makes it one of those all the more intriguing games. Probably not for the neutral, but if you're a fan of the Championship, this will be probably one where your eyes dart to. But from a Burnley perspective and Scott Parker, they'll see this as a good opportunity to get to the next round. And I think from a Southampton and Norwich perspective, they'll see this as a good chance to get a win and boost the confidence because. Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong. Burnley are the best defence in the country, so if they can break that down, then hopefully that'll bleed a lot of confidence into teams. I don't know what you think about that, Gab.
Well, before we came on, I was researching if there was anyone in non-league that had a better defensive record than Burnley, and I got down to about step 5, step 6 of non-league. So, we're looking at 10th tiers, and I couldn't find anyone that came close to Burnley. So, look, they've certainly in the down to the semi-pro game and maybe even down to sort of amateur level and towards Sunday League level, I think. I'd be surprised if anyone can really match that. I mean, 9 goals in 30 games is just absolutely astonishing. I'd love to know if anyone has a story of a team conceding with a better defensive record than that. So yeah, it really is mind blowing that defensive record from Scott Parker's side, and very interesting to see where this extraordinary run of clean sheets continues.
We're going to link this up with a little question that we've got for you. And I'll read it out for you and you can feel free to respond. Gab, you can respond first. Justin, you get time to think about it. You're a Championship manager going well in the league, looking red hot for promotion and a struggling relegation struggling relegation threatened Premier League team approaches you to take over as manager and keep them up. They offer to double your salary on a 3-year deal, but if you don't keep them up, you likely face the sack. What do you do? Do you stick or twist?
I know you're probably wanting a straight one-word answer to this, but I think...
Oh, no, absolutely not. Crack on.
Okay, all right. So it would depend on a few things. There's one thing which would be my relationship with the board. So if the board are a bit lukewarm with me and haven't committed to me for a long-term contract, I might be more likely to go. Depends on the relationship with the fan base. So if I'm a club legend at the club that I'm managing or grew up supporting them as I'd probably be more likely to stay. Whereas I think, so I think there's a few factors there. Generally, I would probably more often stick in these situations than twist, because I think it's really important that you try and finish your achievements. I think if you leave halfway through, I think it sort of undermines it a little bit. And I think that I tend to like the idea of just finishing a season, getting to the end of it and achieving something or not, and then making the decisions from there, as opposed to leaving when it's sort of your work's half done. Listen, I know sometimes in football great opportunities come up and sometimes you've got to move for your family or whatever else, but I also feel like there's something incomplete about leaving in the middle of a promotion race. So I think in most cases I would probably stick, but depending on what my relationship is with the board and with the fan base.
I play a lot of Football Manager, so I've been in this scenario a fair few times. I think on a more serious note, I think Matt Bloomfield's found himself in a similar position on a slightly different scale. He's taken Wickham to the cusp of, I won't say cusp of League One promotion, but on the verge of being on the cusp of League One promotion, and he's gone to a relegation threatened team in the Championship in Luton, who have got a lot of money, clearly spending it, and it's an opportunity to progress as a manager. But if they do go down, will he get sacked? Potentially. But he's taken a gamble, and I think it's how you assess whether the gamble's worth it. And I think go back to Matt Bloomfield, he's probably come into a squad and gone, there's probably more issues than I thought there were here. So you never know until you actually walk into a team. But on paper, if the squad's good enough, you look at it and you think, okay, it's good enough, then sure, you take it. I mean, Danny Rule was in a similar situation, I imagine, with Sheffield Wednesday. I think if Southampton would have paid the compensation fee, he probably would have gone. It's a good squad. It's well invested. So I think in terms of looking at a squad and looking at the investment, I probably would take the risk as well. I think we see a lot of Championship managers do it. Nathan Jones has done it. Go back to Southampton, obviously. I think it's worth it if you want to further your ambition. It depends how ambitious you are, or it depends if the project is worth your time to stay at the club you're at as well. Which as a Championship club isn't always the case. There's not many.
Yeah, absolutely. You make some great points there, Justin. Just to kind of flip it the other way, I would probably say this is why, from a boardroom perspective, there's more of an incentive to stick with managers through difficult moments, or at least give them the benefit of the doubt sometimes, especially if they've achieved something previously, because then you're basically incentivizing managers to stay when their stock's high and they get offers. Because if they think that the minute things go bad, they're going to be out the door, they think, well, I might as well jump now. So I think that shows how, the better clubs are probably going to, stick with their managers and give them an opportunity.
Yeah, I think ambition's the key point, the key word in all of this. Ambition of the club you're leaving, is it there? The ambition of the manager yourself, you're going to take that job. And obviously the ambition of the team you're taking over, do they want to invest in January? I know we're coming out of January now, but prior to January, etc., are they going to invest in the squad? Can you convince them not to sack you if you do take them down, etc.? It's where the ambitions lie, and I think that's the key thing.
Right, moving on, Gab, it's time for your corner of concern, and I believe you've got the right man in for your corner.
Absolutely, yeah. I think we've touched on this earlier, Justin, but I'd love to kind of expand a bit more. So Derby definitely having creative issues. I do wonder whether bringing in a target man from Scandinavia is going to help a little bit in terms of the style of play, because with the best will in the world, if you're playing long balls and crossing it into Jerry Yates, I think he's done well with what he has, but he's not really a target man. Whereas I'm wondering whether the chap you brought in this January is going to help, along with bringing in Matt Clark at the back, because I think you've definitely got to try and create more. I don't think defensively you're too far off. You've obviously got David Ozo back as well, which is something of a positive, but certainly more needs to be done.
Yeah, definitely. Salverson's the target man that's come in. Is I'm completely making this up, but I've heard he's the second best Norwegian striker after Erling Haaland. Take it or leave it. I'm definitely making that one up. But he's a big target man. But as you say, I think the way
I'll
Derby
go with
play,
Andrew Flo.
yeah, we're going back some years there. But I think in terms of the way Derby play, obviously he's set up to play with him. And you are right, Jerry Yates isn't a target man. That is a problem. We're constantly crossing the ball into him. We don't have an outlet. That is a problem. But is one target man really going to change things? How often have we seen target men come into clubs, score 15, 16 goals? They're not typically prolific. They are 12, 13 goals a season, very useful, but they get more out of the individuals around them. And I just don't think Paul Warne really understands that, to be critical. Again, I think a lot of the problems that Paul Warne has as well is his selection, his decision making with substitutions, his in-game management is really, really poor. It was a problem in League One, and it's getting found out now. You go back to the game on Saturday against Sheffield United. Ryan Niembe had to come off at half-time. He's only just come back from injury. Instead of bringing on Jake Rooney, who himself is also coming back from injury, but 45 minutes, he probably needs minutes in his legs. He's coming back from injury himself, but instead of bringing on Jake Rooney, who's a natural defender, he moved his best midfielder in Ibo Adams out of midfield and into the back line, which for me, it didn't make any sense. You've got to take risks in this scenario, and the risk there was to put in Jake Rooney and leave Ibo Adams in that midfield. And I think that's where the problems lie. It's not just going forward, it's decision-making. It's really important. I don't think a splurge in incomings is going to change the style of play. In possession as well, Derby are really, really poor. Really, really poor. The way they give the balls away, a lot of the problems that Derby have are self-made. Because I don't think, and this is obviously baseless, but the proof is in the pudding. Derby do not do a lot of in-possession work because otherwise they'd be better at keeping the ball. It's simple as that. It's those moments that are really letting Derby down. Unfortunately, that's why they're dropping into the bottom three.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely adore Paul Warne on a personal level. I think that he's an inspiration. I think that he's a trailblazer for vulnerability in modern leadership. I think that the culture that he sets by sort of leading from the front and giving people reasons to play for one another and creating a culture where people will go beyond the court, beyond what's required, above and beyond for one another, I think is incredibly admirable. And I think football, in many ways, is better with Paul Warne in it than without him. At the same time, there's part of me that thinks on a technical level, you get coaches who have had this 20-year career, like Ruben Selles and Danny Rowe, who have been perfecting and refining their methodology for 20 years. And I think in Paul Warne's case, it's a little bit different in that he sort of a little bit fell into it by accident because he was fitness coach at Rotherham. And then when, was it David Weir who left Rotherham with his own coaching staff? Alan Stubbs, sorry, not David Weir. It was... getting the Everton defenders mixed up there. And when they left, it was like Paul Warne basically stepped up as caretaker, and Tony Stewart was happy to give him the job. And it does sort of make me think. Generally, when Paul Warne has had his jobs, it's been through owners who aren't necessarily huge football people, but have taken a lot of responsibility for the football side. So Tony Stewart makes all the footballing decisions at Rotherham United, isn't really a huge technical football person. David Klaus makes all the footballing decisions at Derby County, isn't really a huge technical football person. And I think that if you're taking a lot of responsibility without really being a technical football person, you're more likely to kind of be won over by a really good human being with great values, and maybe apply a less critical lens to somebody's actual technical decision making. And that's where I think Paul Warne has kind of built his career that way. But I think if he applied for a job where it was decided by a sporting director who had a real strong football background, I'm not sure he'd necessarily get the job. Now, I'm not discrediting Paul Warne's achievements, because 4 promotions from League One is an excellent achievement. And I think at that level, his people skills possibly do sort of outweigh his more technical limitations, but I'm not sure that it's sustainable. So yeah, love Paul Warne from a personal perspective, but not sure that he's quite up to Championship level.
Moving on from your corner of concern, Gab, to your Championship treble. Obviously, last weekend, unlucky not to win with Sheffield Wednesday letting you down. Who's on this week's list?
Yeah, this week I've gone for Sunderland to beat Watford, given the sort of question marks over the managerial position at Watford and the sort of discontent that's causing Watford fans who are massive fans of Tom Cleverley. I think Norwich City beat Derby County for the reasons we've talked about in terms of Derby County, but also Norwich City's incredible goal-scoring home form. And I also think Sheffield United will beat Portsmouth.
Perfect. Right, well, we'll leave it there, gents. Thanks for joining me this week. Just check out Justin and Gab on our socials. The links will be in the description. Thanks for joining us on The Sportsman Untitled yet again. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Spotify. And we'll be back next Monday for more. Thanks, boys.